Gotham City Year 1 Issue 6, the final issue, Tom King writing with Phil Hester on the art, wrapping up and doing something relatively surprising, I thought, here, when I realised what he was getting at, because the first half of this issue...
Okay. I'm glad that wasn't just me, because I felt dumb.
Yeah, I had no idea either, Matt. Don't worry. I was clueless on this.
Was I supposed to be picking this up the whole time, and I just missed it because I was reading between the lines? There's
probably hints when you met his mother a few issues ago, right? That was probably where most of the hints were, but
yeah, okay.
So the big thing in this issue is that the first half of it, before we get the confrontation with Richard Wayne and the wife and the mansion, Constance, is that Slam's explaining his backstory and how he became a cop. And he's talking about how he just walked in one day, got us, the application form to start training or whatever, and he went home to fill it in. And you're going through this story and it's all playing well, and then he gets to the part where he says there was a question that was like, what is your race? Are you white or are you? And the word there specifically was colored, was the word in the form, which fits the time period. And he says in the moment, well, I could always pass for either. So I picked white without thinking about it because it was just what you did to fit in. And obviously this was the moment where I went, wait a minute, Slam, have you not been white this whole time? Because I thought you were. And obviously it is harder to tell in a comic that is, very flat colours and like nothing's necessarily been there to suggest that he's anything other than just a white dude. But obviously it makes it very clear though as he's going, because he talks about how he was the first ever black man to make detective in Gotham City, but no one in the force knew that. No one knew he was black when he became detective.
And it's because nobody knew, right? He was able to take advantage of it, and because then it adds a whole new shade of what happened to his brother, right?
Yeah, because it mentioned
him going through there.
Yeah, his brother was beat to death by police in the station years ago, and he didn't know exactly what happened until he looked at the file, and there was no report on it. It just had like a little set of initials, and the initials basically meant, someone black acted out a line, and we had to kill them. That was like the gist of it, in harsher language that I don't want to repeat.
Much harsher language, yeah. Which this one was the first issue that came with a disclaimer at the beginning and in the title. Yeah, so in the title, and it said, we understand that this is insensitive to people, but for the story that they're telling and for the time period they're trying to reflect, it's crucial to the story. So essentially trigger warning here, which that stood out. So that was kind of my first clue that something big was happening.
Oh yeah, I didn't think
in this book.
Yeah, like obviously some of the language that's used and the topics it's bringing up is insensitive, but I don't think the story itself is insensitive.
No.
It's got a point. It's got a
right.
Yeah.
But that was my first clue that something big was gonna drop in this issue.
I mean, the books had the subtext of race the entire time, because you've had this woman who's black, who's part of the kidnapping. You've had a lot of talk about the North versus the South side and how the rich treat the South side, so on and so forth, and kind of like Slam being part of both worlds, which in hindsight actually is a good bit of foreshadowing.
Right. Well, and that was the other thing too, is when they talk about how he lives in the South side, right? But he's kind of like, we quote unquote have to live there. And it was a joke amongst, his fellow cops there. And it was always him like having to denigrate who he really is to fit in, and all the pain that caused.
And all of a sudden, the fact that he's no longer on the force and he is kind of like outside that system makes a lot more sense with that information. So
why he finally snapped, right?
Yeah.
When he,
So all this was working. All this was kind of like building up to these reveals, and when it finally gets to him with the Waynes, after he beats up the bodyguard guy, he comes in and the wife reveals she already knew about the affairs. Richard tries to deny it, but she talks about how she found down in the cave, and she even talks about how the entrance of behind the clock is there, and she found the cave, and like he's got like almost like a serial killer's like trophy room, but just for like affairs, where it's like, oh, some panties from this woman, some photos of this woman, so on and so
like
on.
Keepsakes from his
conquests,
dalliances,
and it's like, that sounds like a serial killer's lair. And she even like says like it chilled me to my bone to think about what you were doing when you'd look at these things. And I'm like, yeah, he was cracking one off like a beast down there.
We know where Bruce gets his penchant for collecting things in caves, right?
Well, here's the thing about this is that I still don't like that they started referring to whoever sent these letters as the Batman, because I think that's too on the nose for the future. But I will say the explanation for like why Richard, who did this, like he orchestrated this kidnapping himself, why he signed it with the bat is because he spends time down in that cave and there's bats down there. Actually, did kind of make some sense to me. I was like, oh, that's actually kind of, because she talks about how you had the audacity to effectively sign it with something, like to sign not your name, but you signed it with a clue of who you really were,
and a symbol, right?
Yeah. I think what's so interesting about this is obviously both these Waynes are shitty people. He's worse than she is, but even she's quite bad because she intentionally incited a race war because she wants to look like a hero when she tells everyone to like forgive and like, you know, Gotham should be strong, and she'll be the hero for telling them to like all get over their grievances. But she's happy that there's riots. She's happy that white people are going down to the south side and just beating people up.
Chaos is a ladder, and now she can climb that ladder.
But I think what's interesting about this, though, as far as like tying into who Batman is that I think both these Waynes are horrible people, but there are qualities that you see in both of them that, like you mentioned, you know, the collecting the trophies is kind of like you know, Batman with his cave, and obviously the use of the cave. But while Batman never for a second would incite a war to make himself look better, but the idea of her like using a bit of manipulation to make herself look like a bigger deal, like that is kind of Batman-y. You know, Batman uses like theatrics and tricks to like feel like a bigger force, to sort of present himself as a bigger deal so that he'll be more effective and he can do more with that. She kind of does it here with like a really malicious way and a cruel way.
Right. Well, and she's lying to herself too that the city will be better off for this now. Right?
Oh yeah, because
she had to sacrifice her daughter, which that was the other thing that makes her, when you know she's having her monologue, that you know she was aware of all this, so she went to go save her, you know, her baby. And when she got there, you know, the baby was such an afterthought that they left her crying, that she, you know, choked on her own spit up. You know, and that was what clicked the thing, that she was going to burn the city down now. You know, that she had to sacrifice her daughter for the greater good now. And it was chilling. You know, it was super bleak. In a way that...
Yeah, it's all... Yeah, on that point, it's almost a twisted reverse of Batman as well. And that, you know, Bruce loses his parents and decides to declare war on the corruption and crime of Gotham to try and make it better. She's effectively saying she's got like doing it, but she's doing it out of revenge. She's like, no, I'm going to burn this city to the ground and build it up in my image because they've taken my daughter from me. And yeah, it's like no one actually killed the daughter directly. No. It was just neglect. It was just, you know, so that's
it was human idea. Stupidity, you know? So, but yeah. Definitely, again, way bleaker than I thought I was going to get. Because, I mean, the story's been pretty bleak throughout, but never in a way that made me go like, oh man, this is really messed up. But then when you remember, or at least when I remember, this is Gotham City Year One. This is what made Gotham into that cesspool that creates Batman.
Well, the symbolism with that is that, you know, she gets the Wayne like chemical plant built that was, you know, supposed to go up on the south side, and no one was happy about it who lived there, and it went up and the area got to shit, and there's that page that goes through the years and it's like gets worse, it looks more derelict, and then it mentions she eventually sold it to Ace and it becomes the Ace chemical plant. So I was like, oh, that's a nice little touch, you know, like just that it became that.
Yeah, because it's on the place where Slam's partner betrayed him and died, where everything kind of started, and then it became that spot that they were pushing against, you know, those protests that eventually become the riot, right? They don't want any of that stuff there. But yeah, so it is this thing that, you know, not only did it create Batman, but it's also created, you know, all these other villains. As well.
Before it was creating characters who put on masks and had more theatrical appearances, it was already creating monsters in the people anyway. Like it was already there. So yeah, it's a super interesting look at like sort of the world a little bit before, and it does mention at the end that she was pregnant. It sounds like she must have just got pregnant before Richard died,
which I'm glad they didn't, because I was really worried they were gonna kind of intimate that maybe Slam.
Yeah, I was worried. For a second I was worried, because there's a moment where she kind of kisses him, and I was like, oh god, are they going to say that Slam's his grandfather? That doesn't do that though. It doesn't do that.
No, it doesn't do that. But it also, when she, so later he's saying what had happened, and she comes to him, 10 years later, 12 years later, something like that, saying that, she wants Slam to toughen Thomas up. He's a smart boy. He likes science. Maybe he'll be a doctor one day.
Yeah, so he's about 10 years old. He wants to be a doctor, but he's too much of a nerd, basically. He's not street smart, and she wants Slam to toughen him up. And she even sort of has like a almost on-the-nose line of like, I don't want him to just think he can run into an alleyway and not expect trouble kind of thing.
Right.
And, it's almost a little too on the nose, but I actually liked it just enough, because it was kind of making a very specific point that Thomas was this idealist who didn't have the tough side to him, and it's almost like it was necessary, because his compassionate, like kind, non-violent, like person that he is almost what Bruce needed first before he was shocked into needing the toughness. If you didn't have Thomas being who he was first before he died, Bruce would never have became what he was. Like, he needed that good influence. And it almost sounds like a miracle that Thomas was as good as he is, because his parents were shit.
Well, and that was always the thing, that I was waiting for some kind of weird twist, right? Yeah. Of it, that, that maybe these are fake Waynes or whatever, because it didn't seem like these are the people that could, end up in Thomas Wayne. Right, that this is their kid.
It's almost like, for as much as Gotham can create a lot of monsters, it can create some good too. And maybe even ties into what Detective's been talking about how the city will create good things to fight back the problems, and that Thomas, in essence, was that, just not as direct as you maybe think. It was more of a knock-on effect of like, okay, his good influence is going to lead to who Batman is, and Batman's the ultimate antibody to whatever shit goes on in Gotham.
Yeah,
it's a really interesting story, and I enjoyed it all the way through, but it was definitely the ending. Like, I was hoping it was going to make it all click, and it kind of did. As far as like being the like this is how much of a cesspool Gotham always was. So.
Well, and Slam is kind of the perfect character for that too, because he does, he does read that line where he was in Detective Comics before Batman showed up, right? So even in the grand scheme of things,
I mean, that's why he was picked for this. That's the meta like idea,
Right, but then what he represents to Gotham is he's this man that walks into worlds, much kind of like Bruce does later in his own way, right? Because he fakes being that billionaire playboy so he can go beat up people in the streets. Where Slam was pretending to be someone that he wasn't, so he could affect change his own way. So they're not too dissimilar there at the end. Whereas it's not actually Bruce's grandfather, but Slam has to exist so Batman exists. So Batman's almost an echo of Slam in and of himself. And like we were talking just now with the meta sense of Slam existing in Detective Comics before, right? He's existing in Gotham so that Batman can show up and make a difference. So again, Tom King telling these stories about things, right? Like, it's like he's so much better at these 6-issue series, I feel, than ongoings, that it's kind of silly at this point.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say specifically 6, because most of them are 12, but yeah.
But you know what I mean.
It's
even like Killing Time, right? Like that, with what that ends up being, it's just like it's just kind of silly that how good these end up being.
Yeah. I think it's phenomenal. Obviously, they are. Like, when the riots are going on early on, you've got all these big red 2-page spreads. You've got the noir, the deep blacks, and all that stuff that the books had the whole time. So it's hard to even talk too much about the art, because it's just sort of doing still what it was already doing so well. But Hesler's art is perfect for it. And obviously, you've got this reflective tone, because this is Slam at the end of his life telling Batman this because he feels like he should know. It's interesting. So yeah, it does feel like sort of a worse version of a lot of the things that are in Batman, and even like those around, because we even compared the other women to Selena when she was jumping on the rooftops that one issue, not a lot of Selena, but just a little bit of like, hey, that reminded us of Selena, just a little bit, but not too much that it was a bit on the nose, and she didn't have a cat motif, and
and that was another thing that I thought, I was like, please don't say like her name was Kyle.
Oh yeah, that would have been a nightmare.
You know what I mean? So like, the fact that she gets out of town, and I think he sends her to Metropolis, to go live out, because she's going to be able to keep that money. Like Constance Wayne makes that. So at least there's kind of an okay story that like she got out of Gotham and was able to make her own way, after all of this. So not that there's a happy ending, but at least for her, she doesn't end up as a dead woman because of Richard Wayne. So. But yeah, no, very, very good. And Hester's art is nice, and those thick lines. It did make me want to watch that Perry Mason show on HBO, just because it has that noir vibe to it. So
I didn't like the first episode, so I can comment. One thing I will say is, do you think Slam is partly telling Bruce this because there's an element of guilt, because knowing what, because now obviously he knows what happened to Thomas Wayne.
Right.
Do you think there's a little element of maybe I should have said yes that one time?
Definitely. I think that's why he says it at the end, that like that's his big what if, because how the story ends, he's like, well, this is just what you need to hear, and that's almost like his admission of guilt, like But then again, it depends on that story of Thomas. Was Thomas, were they leaving the theater early because of Bruce, like in Batman Begins, right? Or were they just taking a shortcut and he should have known better? I guess it just depends on which origin you're going with.
Oh yeah, there's always slight tweaks to it, but
so.
Fascinating stuff. What are you giving Gotham City Year 1, Issue 6?
I'm gonna give this a 9.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy 9 for me as well.